I'm Paul King, one of the co-founders of Flow Mobile Surveying, and today I'm here with Gareth Harrison from Helix Environmental, and we're going to talk about the asbestos industry, becoming self-employed, and all sorts of stuff, I imagine. Let's see where the conversation goes. How are you today, Gareth?
Good. Thanks for having me. Yeah, really excited. I haven't done anything like this before, so it's completely new to me. And yeah, we'll just see where it goes.
It's good to get out of your comfort zone, isn't it?
Yeah, stay in the deep end. Yeah, it's going to make me sweat a little bit, I think, but it's exciting. Yeah, I mean, as a trainer, I do it every day I'm dancing around all day in front of people. So, I mean, there's less people to impress today, I guess.
So tell me about Helix Environmental and how you got to where you are now.
Sure. So I guess first and foremost, I'm an asbestos surveyor. That's what I started doing. So left university, joined a company who had, I guess, asbestos sort of surveying as one of their offerings. Joined as a trainee surveyor, grown through there, moved through a couple of companies then, I guess, moved up. And then eventually got to a point where I wanted to start something for myself and my family. So we started Helix Environmental. We've got a few different offerings and started down the freelance route just to sort of get that sort of bread and butter money in, and then slowly improved our sort of marketing and our little imprint in South Wales and beyond. And yeah, now we're a fully fledged company. So the freelancing, I guess, has sort of come to an end, and now I'm a director, I guess, rather than a freelancer, which is exciting. And yeah, so it's taken, I guess, 10 years to get there, but on the way through, I've learned a lot about the industry. I've dealt with lots of different companies and clients on the way through, and as far as sort of my fee earning offering, I can do a lot of different things as well. So whether it was air testing or surveying, as we mentioned, or training, and the asbestos removal side of things, which is fairly recent. I mean, obviously it's something my company does, and I've kind of got to know how to do it before I can teach other people to do it, right? And I've been doing it for training. Been teaching people how to do it for years now, and finally been able to actually get my hands dirty and do it myself now, and obviously have teams of people who do it for us now. So yeah, it's been an exciting journey, and obviously it's had some tough times on the way through. You've got to do your mandatory housing stock, and I mean, surveyed probably 4,000 or 5,000 houses in my time, and
wow.
And yeah, dealt with all the good and the bad of the housing sector, let's say. As a surveyor, you're probably a glorified ceiling scraper as well. So I've seen my fair share of Artex ceilings, definitely. And yeah, made some good friends on the way. Got good relationships with companies as well, and haven't burnt bridges. And yeah, I like to think we stand in good sort of reputation as well, which is, I think, is key for this. In that, when you do jump out, you are the product. Simple as that. I mean, you are the person and the item you have to sell. So it's good to be good, I think.
So tell me about the good and the bad. You mentioned there about the good and the bad. What are the good parts of being a surveyor versus maybe the more gnarly parts, I suppose?
Gnarly's an interesting word for it. I think good. I mean, let's go to the good first. You go on adventures, really. You know, you go into lots of different areas, whether it's going to be surveying ships or submarines, or climbing up the Houses of Parliament, or going into castles and finding bomb shelters in schools. And you take that with the rougher side of things, where you're dealing with dodgy tenants and fleas and stepping in things that you don't want to be stepping in, and
oh my goodness,
and stuff like that. But yeah, I mean, obviously in context, it all sort of ends in a positive experience, I say. I mean, you deal with lots of different types of people as well, which I think is really good, and it's really helped me with my training. In that, you've got to be a bit of a chameleon, whether you're dealing with someone who's in a council house, or you're dealing with a politician or a scientist or a head teacher or someone like that. So it's been really nice to deal with lots of different types of people, and then travel around the UK. I mean, I'm up here today, and it's not really a problem for me to travel this far. As a surveyor, you probably know that you do a lot of driving, but you learn ways around it. You make a lot of phone calls, you listen to a lot of podcasts, things like that on the way through. And yeah, I'll always promote the asbestos surveying side of it. People don't like saying you're an asbestos surveyor. People tend to take 2 steps back from you if you say that, as if you're made of the stuff. But yeah, I'll always advertise the positive aspect of being a surveyor. It's I think I'll always be one as well. It's going to be something that's really difficult to get rid of as a director now, in that if we win some big work, then we have people who are able to do that work. I should really be the person who's sort of winning work now and dealing with sort of the business development and stuff like that. But I want to stick a suit and mask on and go crawling through, some stuff, whether it's a nice boiler room somewhere, but I've got to learn to let go of that, I think, at some point.
But then you're letting go of the adventures, right?
Yeah, and it's one of the advantages of having your own business, right? Is you can choose what you do and don't do. And if I know it's not going to be a very nice survey, I'll just give it to someone else to do.
Quite a range then. So surveying the Houses of Parliament and council houses with fleas. That's it's chalk and cheese, isn't it?
It's a varied week, I think. And some people quite like routine. They like being able to know exactly where they're going to be from 9 to 5. It means they can go to the gym in the mornings, or they do their weekly shop on this day or that, or they have classes they go to on certain days. But in this industry, and especially with what I'm doing at the moment with our multiple offerings, every single week is different. And I love it and hate it at the same time. It'd be quite nice to know where I am next Thursday, but that can change tomorrow. All of a sudden I'm driving up to Newcastle or somewhere like that, right? So I like having a varied week. If I was asbestos surveying for 5 days a week, I wouldn't enjoy it as much. If I was training 5 days a week, I wouldn't enjoy that as much. So I get
the variation.
A really nice variation. So today I'm doing something like this, whereas tomorrow I know I'm asbestos surveying, and I know the day after that I'm going to be training, and then it's the weekend. So who knows? So yeah, that sort of varied week is really important to me.
Awesome. And you mentioned before that you did this for your family, or you went self-employed for your family. Can you explain a bit more about that?
Yeah, definitely. I think there are ceilings to income, obviously, when you're at a company, and there's a few ways of improving your income. It's either sort of waiting for the person above you to leave and then climbing that ladder. I don't have the patience for that. I really don't. So I wanted to take my income into my own hands. And obviously, when you start off, you can make as much money as you want to make. And the only limitation to that is time, right? In that, in a working week, and if you want to add weekends and evening work in there as well, you can make as much as you want to make based on the time. And I wanted to bring that into my own control, really, just for my children. We started Helix, I guess, during the pandemic. It did really well for some people, didn't do very well for other people as far as sort of the change in the world, if that makes any sense. But we started a company, and I had my youngest, Charlie, a month after we started Helix as well.
Right.
So we had we had Alice. I think she was 2 when the pandemic started. So we had a toddler and a newborn at the same time as we started a company where the world was falling apart. So that was exciting. But I quite like being in the deep end. I sort of trust myself to the sense that I know that obviously given the right sort of time and the right tools with the right software, with those types of things, we can make some build something that would be successful. That would to where we are today with Helix. We're not freelancers anymore. We're a fully fledged company where we have multiple teams of people out today.
Brilliant.
Yeah. So we've grown quite a bit since then, which is nice.
Nice. And what's been the most exciting or memorable part of that journey? I mean, I know myself, having gone self-employed, there's a lot of graft in the beginning, a lot of hard work, and then eventually you get to the point where you think, oh, this is starting to get worth it now. What's been the most memorable or interesting part of the journey for you?
We've had a few checkpoints on the way through. So we've got a unit now. We have our own, I guess, home for the company, which is really nice. So it was quite nice for sort of to take my kids there when it was like an empty shell. And I know like we're refurbishing it right now. So in a few weeks' time, it's going to be, I guess, a home for the company. Our name's going to be on the front of the door. That's a really nice sort of checkpoint for us, which is nice. And it's nice for the kids to see that they've seen it from, like, even though the children, from nothing to, I guess, what it is today as well, which is really nice. And another checkpoint was in February. We had a number of jobs on, and I think we had 9 people, I guess, working under the Helix badge in a day. We all had them in one place to start with.
Wow.
And they sort of like for sort of a morning sort of team meeting, and then they all sort of scattered then to where they were going to go. That was a really nice sort of point for us. And I think it's a nice thing to talk about today, really. We're going from, I guess, a freelancing role, starting your own sort of like on your own and being the product, to eventually having people work with you and for you in various ways. And that's where you really start growing then, because it means that we can chat today, because I know I've got teams out working for Helix today. Whereas if I was freelancing and it was just me doing asbestos surveys, let's say for a company, if I was to do this today, then no money's being made. So that's a big difference in terms of sort of growth of the company.
Yeah, interesting. So you're not trading your time all the time for money. It's you're growing a team, and they're going out and doing some of the work for you. Brilliant. So in terms of working in small businesses and big businesses, I'd like to sort of dig into that a little bit. I know you've worked in quite a few companies. How have you found that experience, or have you got any sort of insights into what that's like?
I quite like working for big companies because as an asbestos surveyor, so I started off at a big company and then they got gradually smaller over time. I don't know if there was a reason for it. Maybe I think it was a way of, I guess, climbing a company a little bit easier. You'd have a bit more freedom to do what you wanted to do, I guess, in smaller companies, and you'd have more responsibility as well, which was key for growth. But for big companies, you did have staff in certain areas. I didn't have to sit there at 2:00 in the morning drawing plans. You'd have someone doing your tech reviews for you to a certain extent. It was easier to sort of lean on people. You'd have technical managers. So the biggest companies I work for tend to have the best quality of surveys because they had people in those areas. They had auditors, they had technical managers, they had a good training scheme, they had good skills matrix and things like that. So that was really good to start at a large company to know sort of the best way to be an asbestos surveyor, and then from there, then you sort of apply that knowledge then in smaller companies, which makes you look a lot better then, right? It makes you look more professional. Go into a small company where there's more on you, you're still going to be applying those things that you've learned 4 or 5 years ago. And it's great for mentoring as well. So in smaller companies where you've got, let's say, a second person working with you, they're going to be, I guess, feeding off the knowledge that you've got from large companies of, highly trained people with good quality systems. And then they grow faster and better, less bad habits and things like that as well.
Yeah, interesting. My brother and I have talked quite a bit about in large companies where staff tend to get siloed. So, you have one person doing floor plans, like you say, maybe someone only experiences the surveying side and doesn't see the office side. Do you have any sort of insight into, I know you do training as well, Gareth, into how siloing staff can affect someone's skills or maybe prevent them from growing? And I know sometimes you have surveyors who just do the surveys, they don't see the final report or even the lab results, so therefore they don't have that feedback loop.
Yeah.
Would you agree that can become an issue in big companies?
Definitely. Yeah, absolutely. Now, it works in both ways though. So large companies have budgets for training as well. So most of my P-certs, for example, I got at my larger companies because they had the budget to pay for that sort of training. Like I would never have done things like air testing without being in a large company, with UCAS accreditation and things like that, for example. So it does have advantages. It does mean that you if you wanted to train yourself and become a better fee earner, better product, then being in a large company has its advantages. But at the same time, you are missing out on a few of the steps of a survey stage, for example. Like you're not there for plan drawing, you're not there for the consultancy afterwards with the client, the recommendations, the management actions and things like that. You're there to gather the raw data, and then a project manager might be that person who sits there with the client and goes, well, this is what we found and this is what we should do and what we should recommend. And I didn't know a lot about the removal process, really. It was very much, like you said, pigeonholed into you are the person who finds the stuff and then we'll deal with it afterwards. Whereas in smaller companies, let's say, you're a part of the whole process. You're a consultant. So you're there to start with, you'll have your initial consultations, your site visits, you'll go and do the surveys, and then afterwards you'll have a meeting, what's the best sort of form of action, and you're there to run the project then to a certain extent. You're there for the whole process. You can see a before and after of removal projects as well. You can be there for the asbestos management plan side of things as well, which is really interesting. So it's nice to have a bit of both. Not like I'm saying for everyone to sort of jump around, because you can be successful in one company if you have the patience to stay there long enough, I think.
I just want to talk a bit about going self-employed. And I spoke to one of our clients in New Zealand recently, and they said that, well, from their perspective, more people were going self-employed. And I know we spoke just before this chat, and you kind of almost had the opposite opinion that a lot of the smaller companies being swallowed up. I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, definitely. So I've found that I've probably worked for about 4 or 5 companies, and half of those have been bought up by a larger compliance company, where maybe they offer a lot of other things, whether it's water or security or they're in Legionnaire or health and safety, and they bring in an asbestos consultancy. So they're actually getting absorbed in. from I guess, an individual point of view, I am finding that there are less individuals as freelancers in the industry because maybe of the risk of, COVID and things like that. It was easier and safer to work for someone rather than sort of like, double down and sort of trust the work that you've got, trust your clientele. And I'm not finding as many freelancers around anymore.
Interesting.
Which is, I wouldn't mind, one or two coming in to help me if that's great. As much as I love asbestos surveying, I do need to get off site at some point. But yeah, I'm finding a lot less now, which is strange. Because when I first started, I was speaking to quite a few different people who made that jump. And they said it was going great, and I haven't heard from them since.
Right. Hopefully they're still around.
Yeah, and obviously there's loads of work out there, so maybe they're off doing their own thing. They're in their own little bubble. We're in our own little bubble, and I like to hope that everyone's doing okay, because there isn't that much competition really, unless we're talking about tenders and things like that. There isn't that much competition in the industry because there's so much work out there, and we're probably going to talk about where the industry's heading and sort of the amount of people that say, oh, we banned it now, well, aren't you going to be out the job soon, sort of thing. But there's so much work out there that there isn't that competition. And if anything, a lot of companies work together as well. We might not be able to offer a certain service that other companies would. And, we'd always want to recommend the best quality companies for certain roles that aren't suited to us. Whether it's in other sort of compliance areas like Japanese knotweed or Legionella, it's not something I do, but we might know companies we've used before for that. So there can be overlap.
Mm-hmm.
Which is handy.
If someone wanted to take the same path as you, Gareth, if they wanted to become self-employed, do you have like one bit of advice that you would give them to get them started? I'm sure it's a bit of a minefield. You've got insurance, you've got how do you find the work? Lot to kind of take in if you've worked at another company. So have you got some advice you give to surveyors looking to take that path?
Yeah, trust yourself. You'll be absolutely fine. Honestly, if you back yourself and you don't burn I know it's cliche, but burning your bridges, it was a real advantage to me starting off, was having a good relationship with companies I've worked with before. And I'm still working with some of those companies as well that I worked with maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago. And by not burning those bridges, and I never left on bad terms. It was very much moving to a different company because, becoming the training manager there, for example, or becoming, more of a project manager or whatever it was. So it was always sort of moving up, which was nice. So I retained that relationship, and when going self-employed, I just reached out, do you need any assistance with this or that? And they knew that I was a good enough asbestos surveyor and a good trainer, and it helps them as well. They know the quality of the person they're getting. So that was a really useful thing starting off. And recruitment consultants, and they get a good rap, they get a bad rap depending on who you speak to, but I know they take a percentage of your day rate and things like that, but they're literally putting work on a plate for you as well. It was a real help to start with, and they offer varied work to a certain extent. So when we started Helix, we started it in, I think, June 2021, and by August or so, when my son was born, which was obviously a whirlwind at the same time, we had Helix work going on, so freelance work during the day, and we were working with a recruitment consultant who had evening work for us. Okay. So it was a contract that started at like 4:30 in the afternoon, and maybe you'd be done by about 7 or 8 o'clock in the evening, depending on sort of where the building was. And it meant that you could sort of double up on your daily income then. So you're getting 2-day rates essentially, which was really handy, which meant that you can maybe work less days a week to work on the company, which is, I guess, the biggest battle for anyone going self-employed is, although it's nice to be making money for yourself or for the company every day, I really struggle with finding time to work on the company. Whether it's branding, whether it's invoicing. My accountant hates me because I'm so behind on everything when it comes to that, like where are your receipts for this and that, and I'm not very good with that yet. But yeah, I guess becoming a director as well, you need time to speak with clients and to offer sort of branding and marketing for your business, and whether it's social media, whether it's building that tender list or going for your accreditations and things like that, you need that time to work on the company as well, which is really important. So sometimes doubling up on your day rate means that you can take Tuesday off and then Thursday off because you're having very long Mondays and Wednesdays, which is handy.
Interesting. I'm just picturing the guy from Black Books with all his receipts stapled to the inside of his jacket.
Oh yeah, it's not great. There's a lot of receipts in my garage just sort of splattered everywhere. I'll go through them at some point, but maybe not today. I got a long drive home.
Well, I see two types of surveyors. I see the ones who are really good at getting the work, and I see the ones who are probably quite good surveyors but are terrible at getting the work. And it's a shame to see those guys not make it, you know. And that's obviously where we are as a company. We do talk to a lot of surveyors who are just starting out, and it's often just the best marketers or the best salespeople who I think are the most successful. So that's quite interesting. Do you think you've got some of that sort of sales and marketing background from your previous work? You're able to sell your experience and your skills?
I think it's through training. In that, when delivering training courses, you're stood there while there could be 20 people staring at you, and the variation of the people you deal with as well means that you can have, you learn to have different types of conversation depending on who's with you. You are going to change the way you speak around certain people. You know, if you're dealing with guys in the maintenance industry, you're going to be a bit more casual, let's say. Whereas when you're dealing with, a lawyer or a politician or a solicitor, you're probably going to be a little bit more technical. So to be, what I mentioned earlier, bringing it back, I guess you are the product. And so by advertising yourself, by having you don't need to be the most charismatic person. I know a lot of surveyors who aren't as charismatic as others, but they're excellent surveyors. So the proof is in the pudding for them. It's just a matter of, well, who knows how good you are if you don't say it.
And you said before this, you're a good chameleon. I think I am too. So you go into a room with outgoing people, you're very outgoing. If someone's a bit more timid, you sort of come back down to that level. I think that helps a lot, right?
Yeah, you got to read the room as well. You got to know who's in front of you, and you can say certain jokes in front of certain people. You know when to be loud, you know when to be quiet, you know sort of when to be a little bit more casual about the topic, or when to be a bit more serious about it. It depends who's in front of you. I've done hundreds of training courses now in my time, and it's really helped me, I think, deal with people. And surveying's the same. As a surveyor, you're always dealing with the client. You're always going to be on site, unless it's like a void property, which is fair enough because you're on your own. But you're always usually going to be, whether it's around tenants, learning to deal with people, at a sensitive topic. You're there as an asbestos surveyor. You're going to be finding a carcinogenic material in their house. You probably will find it. They don't know it's there. They'd never even think it was going to be in their house. And then you end up with, a bag full of samples, kind of going, oh, yeah, maybe there's a little bit in here. So dealing with people like that and playing down a topic or explaining why you're there, it puts people's mind at ease then, because you are going into houses where you're dealing with elderly people, and you need to sort of learn how to sort of, I guess, gain their trust. You're going to be going into their bedroom and their attic and their bathroom and things like that. So you've got to learn to deal with that and sort of talk them through that. And that's been really handy. And then moving forward then as a consultant, then you're dealing with the client. You're there with the raw data, and maybe you're there to sort of sell other things for your company. Whether it's removal packages or air testing for this and that, you're there as sort of Mr. Salesman then, without being a bit of a sort of wheeler dealer car salesman. But it definitely has allowed me to speak to lots of different types of people.
I'd like to talk a little bit about work-life balance. How do you think that starting up on your own has, I suppose, impacted your work-life balance? Has it given you a better work-life balance, or completely the opposite?
Short answer, no. Long answer, not yet.
Right. Okay. So you see it somewhere on the horizon?
Yeah, absolutely. So to start with, you are going to be in the trenches.
Yeah.
But you've got to think about 2-3 years ahead. If you were going to be a freelancer and you were going to work for a few different companies on a day rate, then you're going to be getting X amount a day. And then it's like, well, how long does that last? And what are you building towards? So if you're only going to be sort of meeting your outgoings, there's no improvement there. And you're going to be doing the same thing, and you're going to be clawing back, and you want to be building towards something. And what we've done really well with Helix is that we've expanded our offering. We've expanded our sort of our fee earner staff sort of level. We've got good companies we deal with now. And we're building towards something, to the point where my work balance wasn't very good to start with. I mentioned having a newborn while doing 2 shifts in a day, 3 or 4 days, 5 days a week basically. But since then it's tapered off, in that we've got people working for Helix today. So it allows me to take my daughter to school, pick her up from school on a lot of days a week, which is really nice. It's invaluable. And people don't get that luxury usually if they were working for a company, right? They'd expect you to be in the office by a certain time and have to leave by a certain time. And And I have that luxury of spending more time with my family now. And if I wanted to take a Friday off now, then I could. And I could go and take the family somewhere, or see friends, or work on the business. And there's a bit more flexibility now. But you've got to get through that. As I mentioned earlier, with being a surveyor, you've got to do your sort of mandatory housing stock. It's the same with running a company. You've got to, without being cliche, dig deep to start with. Mm-hmm. But then, as long as you're building towards something, and every week you're a little bit further ahead than where you were last week, you'll definitely see, in 6 months, a year, you'll look back and think, yeah, we're way ahead of where we were last year, which is really nice.
Yeah, I agree. That first 6 months to a year was pretty gnarly for us as well. I mentioned that we've both freelanced, my brother and I, just to keep the lights on. And then, there's that inflection point where suddenly it gets a lot easier all of a sudden. Would the ultimate goal, would that be to spend more time with family? Do you have hobbies outside of work you'd like to sort of focus on? I'd love to hear about what is your vision for the future.
Yeah, I want to spend more time with my family. I mean, that's the most important thing for me, is spending more time with those. And my wife's been amazing with obviously starting this thing, because you do essentially make less money to start with, even though you're freelancing. We've had to sort of dig in for a couple of years, but they'll have the benefits of that in a few years. And whether it's jumping into other businesses or going into the property industry, or buying a little place abroad here and there, they'll get the sort of the fruits of what we planted 2 years ago in the near future, which is great. And we'll get experiences from that, and we'll go on adventures. And as much as I'm doing my surveying adventures now, it means that I'll be able to do more family adventures soon, which is really nice. And it allows me to work on things that are outside of work. I probably shouldn't say that. I don't mind asbestos, but it's not my life, and I have to sell it. I have to make it look interesting. As a trainer, I have to make people sort of, engaged in and find interesting facts here or there, and on my way finding loads of different samples that I can use and throw at people and say, oh, look, have a look at that, and sell the industry. But it's not everything, right? You need to obviously have your own sort of passions and what outside of work, which is nice as well. And I'll get to those at some point. But right now, like we say, we're still sort of in that starter phase, which is nice though. It's exciting. I mean, same as you understand with Flow as well, and I can see that your sort of your marketing's really good. Your social media you're way more active on that now as well. I'm just saying it for the camera now. But you can usually tell when a company's in a nice place based on, I guess, how much it's posting online as well, because it allows you time to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Like sometimes the marketing's the thing to go at the back of the pile if you're just completely up against it all the time. But going back to what you said before, I like the saying that your life today is the result of your actions like a year or 2 years ago. So I'm constantly thinking like, what am I doing today for future Paul and future David and future staff, and so that's interesting. Do you think you've built a good team around you at this point? Are you happy with like the progress of how things are going?
Yeah, definitely. Trust is everything when you got your own company. So I've got a really good business partner in Chris, in that he's probably the only person financially that I'll trust in the world, with my wife as well. We're a different type of team, but and with regards to our removal teams, I'd like to expand our sort of technical side of things now. I'd like to bring a surveyor in. I think if I was to bring a trainee on, it'd take a long time to get them to a level. So as far as freelancers in the industry now, it'd be really good to work together, and have someone who we can work with in certain regions. And we're in other areas now as well. We run London asbestos services now. I love London. So if there's a way that I can get there once a month for a couple of days to do some site visits, and then obviously have our teams go over there as well and sort of slowly start planting seeds in other areas around the country, then that's going to be really sort of handy as well. It's more adventures out of that as well. So but in terms of our team, we are looking to expand now. Mm-hmm. We're at that point now where we haven't taken any funding. We've started from scratch, so there's no real debt when it comes to Helix. So sort of the money that's there now is ours to invest. So, we want to invest in people, and obviously when we have people on board, they make more money for the company, and then it starts growing and snowballing. And so we're at that point now, we're about to become, I guess, not a player in the game as such, but a company that can compete with other asbestos companies in the nicest of ways, obviously.
Amazing. And how long has it taken you to do that? 3 years?
We started in June 21.
Okay.
So not quite, about 2 years, roughly. And that started with freelancing. It started with freelance training. it started with freelance surveying with other companies, and I'm still doing that for some companies now. But obviously we have our own clientele. We offer a number of different services in asbestos surveying, asbestos removal, and reinstatement as well is something that we've gone into. So we work with some really good contractors now in that for our clients, where let's say we rip a ceiling down, they're going to want a new ceiling back up, right? So we work with really good sort of contractors who are specialists in certain industry, in carpentry and plastering and roofing. And then we, something that our clients can benefit from as well in having good quality reinstatement. I feel like I'm selling this for some reason.
You've just given me some great insights into my asbestos surveyor's handbook there, so that's interesting. I want to talk a bit about the asbestos industry in general. I know they've said they want to remove asbestos from all buildings in 50 years' time. I don't know how practical that is. It sounds like very impractical, but where do you see the asbestos industry in, say, 20 years' time?
I think I'll still have a job,
okay.
which is obviously really good. I'd like there to be more push for training. I think one of the biggest problems we've got in the industry right now is they're not in the industry, but as far as maintenance and construction, is that a lot of people don't even know the right questions to ask. Big companies have compliance teams who ask the right questions. Whereas when you've got Bob's plumbers, Di's roofers and things like that, they don't necessarily know what their legal obligations are. Those are going to be the people nowadays who are exposing themselves to things that they shouldn't be. So I like to think as a trainer, whoever sits on any of our courses, they'll leave there with that little warning light in their head, knowing, right, well, before I do that, how old is the building? Do I need a survey for this and that? I know that roof tiles could potentially contain that. If they've got Cat B training, they know what they can and can't work with as well. So trainings, I'd like to hope is going to take a bigger step, a bigger mandatory step, I think, as well. And then from an asbestos surveying point of view, obviously there isn't any sort of legal obligation for domestics at the moment. Home buyers surveys isn't really a thing yet. And I guess a large proportion of domestic properties are older than 23 years old, would have been built using asbestos-containing materials at some point. And the only way people tend to find out is maybe if you've got a private homeowner who is having a new disabled bathroom grant, and they go in and they'll bring in their own asbestos sort of surveyor to look after the bathroom fitters, let's say. That's the legal obligation. And then on the way through, they realize, well, all the walls in here are made of AIB. Does this tenant know that? And they're not going to, are they? They're not going to know. As you know, there's so many different items which contain asbestos that, most people wouldn't know. They know about corrugated roof sheets. They know about pipe lagging, but there's so many other things that are in a house today that people just don't know. And they won't know the right questions to ask. And if you've got someone who's, an older gentleman who's a carpenter, he's going to be drilling through his own door headers. He's going to be, taking his own soffits down. He's going to be the person who's going to be exposing himself and maybe others to some stuff. So I like to hope that there's going to be a bit more of a mandatory stamp on all buildings older than 20 years old in the UK, 23 years old in the UK. And then from a removal point of view, obviously there isn't any legal obligation to remove it. It wouldn't be cost effective to just go, right, well, this year everything's going. It'd be great for us, for our removal team. But
you'd have a very good year. After that, maybe not so much.
It'd be quite busy, wouldn't it? Yeah, I think I'd be on a lot of roofs myself, I think, pulling corrugated sheets off and stuff like that. But I think from a removal point of view, there should be more mandatory sort of at least plans in place. And I know you mentioned everything gone by sort of 2050 and things like that, but it's like, well, how concrete is that? Or is it just something that's hearsay in Parliament? They're just going to say, oh, we're just going to make sure everything's gone by then. It's like, well, is there any weight to it? Is there a plan in place? And I think there should be for certain types of buildings, whether it's schools, whether it's hospitals, areas where you've got a lot of vulnerable people. And, when you've got teachers working in these buildings, whether it's like CLASP scheme buildings and there's AIB cladding around everywhere and they have to go into boiler rooms for this and that. And you're going to have a lot of people inadvertently expose themselves to stuff that they don't want to breathe in, obviously. No one wants to breathe asbestos in, it's quite easy to say, but when it's their workspace, you'd like to, you want to make it as safe as possible. And I think just sticking a label on something isn't the best way of doing it.
Do you think there's a big chasm between what's practical in that sense and what's, I suppose, what politicians might say, lip service, what they think should be done, is a reality versus the vision, is that quite different, do you think?
It's cost, right? Costs everything. And it's quite an expensive material to move depending on the type of works that it's going to be. So I know there's grants and things like that a lot of sort of councils can get, But yeah, a lot of it's just financial. It's a bit cheaper to buy a tin of paint to paint your boards rather than spend $3,000 to remove them. So, makes sense, right? And just throwing numbers out the air, by the way. I don't know what we're dealing with, but yeah, it's a cost thing, unfortunately, and especially in times now where interest rates are going up, people want to focus on spending money in the important areas. Do they really need to remove all that stuff that's in the attic when they can just restrict access instead? So it's finding that balance. But I think there has to be some sort of step-by-step plan. And that's what management plans are all about, I guess, really, isn't it? Is how you're going to deal with it on an annual basis.
You mentioned training a little bit earlier. Has training give you like a good insight into, I suppose, what makes a good asbestos surveyor? Like, could you pick out of a crowd someone who's good in terms of experience and know why they're good, just from your experience of training?
You know the bad ones.
You know the bad ones.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think the best sort of surveyors who sort of grow into the industry are the career ones, the ones where you can go down any path in this industry. So if you work for a big company, you might end up as an analyst, you might end up as a technical manager, you might end up as a trainer. There's a lot of different paths you can go down rather than just being a sort of a housing stock surveyor. I've dealt with a lot of them who are happy enough sort of doing that, and they do their 5 a day and they're quite happy doing that on repeat because it pays the bills. Whereas when you've got the career people who are interested, who do their sort of extra research and want to do more training and want to not climb the ladder as such, but want to improve on their own personal development in the industry, those are the people who I find they produce better quality reports because they care about it. They're not just going, right, well, it's 2:30 now and I know the school run's going to start now, so I want to make sure I'm out with you in 20 minutes so I can get home in time. Those types of people won't always have the best quality surveys.
Yeah.
Whereas the people who are hungry about it, who want to spend time on it, who will spend an extra 2 or 3 minutes in a room, who will write a few extra lines on that sort of survey template, those are going to be the people who would sort of catch the eye of someone as a gold standard fee earner, let's say.
You mentioned there about survey reports and quality. Obviously, you've seen a lot of survey reports, I'm sure, in your time, as have I. Must have seen hundreds, I think, at this point. How do you improve the quality of your asbestos survey reports? Do you have do you have some tips for maybe people starting out or people who just want to improve themselves in their reports?
Obviously, depending on the company you're at, they probably have their own sort of ethos on how they want to represent that survey. Whether you're a room-led survey, whether you're an item-led survey, there's certain sort of terminologies that one company would use compared to another, even just by like saying texture coating or Artex or wherever it might be. They have their own way of doing it, and I guess it depends on the company, but it's just about data. It's just the more information you can put into that, the better. So some of the companies that I worked with before, they just had a drop-down list rather than have like a blank box. Okay. Because maybe they had a pool of 10 different asbestos surveyors and they wanted to sort of box them in because everyone varied a little bit. They wanted to make sure that the way that survey was represented was boxed in. They could only choose out of like 3 or 4 options for this or that. Whereas other companies might just have a blank box and they'd say, right, go, fill that in. What is in this room, basically? And yeah, as far as quality of surveys, definitely that plans are always a really important aspect of things as well. Having a sort of a good quality plan, and yeah, it's just data. The more information you can put in, and you want to make it easy to interpret as well. That client's not going to want to read that 300-page survey with a lot of bump in it, right? They're not going to want to go through. I guess I mentioned paragraphs and data. They don't want to have to go through a lot of unnecessary data as well. Mm-hmm. A lot of the time, they just want to know, well, where it is or where it isn't.
What's my problem? How do I fix it?
Yeah, exactly. And then obviously, depending on what's positive, it's like, is this a problem? Do we need to do anything about it? What types of work's it going to be? So from a client perspective, they want something that's easily readable. Whereas if you work for a company, your company's going to want you to provide as much raw data as possible.
That drop-down example's a great one that we think about a lot. As you say, you can box someone in, but you might box them in too much. I can understand why people do it. They want consistency in their reports, but you've got to also have the flexibility, right? Allow people to, pick out those edge cases and write them down somehow. You don't want to just give them a 10 option list.
Yeah, it takes a long time to input those types of surveys as well. So I know speed isn't everything, but as far as flow's concerned, like by far the quickest software I've ever used, which is a really good thing because it means that I can focus more on actually doing my job rather than sitting on someone's stairs, going through a drop-down list, going, oh, which one, where's the plasterboard? You know what I mean? So it's definitely an advantage, and then you can focus more on the task at hand. provide a better survey because you're not sat there inputting for 3 hours, which definitely helps. Definitely makes the job less tedious, let's say.
Love it. Yeah, one of our surveyors once said, flow makes surveying fun again. I love that comment from one of our clients. They said, yeah, I can just concentrate on the work. I don't have to worry about the technical side of things, which I loved. So speaking of technology, what advances do you think you'll see in the industry that'll help this industry, or maybe, I don't know, what advances would you like to see?
That's an interesting one. I think there can definitely be something done post-survey.
Okay.
Management plans they're not quite there yet. They're very bespoke to the company. If there's something that can be done on having some sort of software that develops management plans based on the surveys that have been completed, that'd be a really good implementation for technology for that. Otherwise, as far as surveying is concerned, I don't think you can improve on what we've got.
Right.
I think it's all about that person based on their previous experiences or what they've missed and said not to miss again, finding whatever's in that room or that building or wherever it is, taking samples of all the suspect items. I don't think you can improve on that. And I know they're trying to bring in a few new technologies to that, but I don't think you can improve on it. It's purely based on the experience of the professionals doing that job, and then making sure that what they find can be represented on whatever the inputting software is.
Mm-hmm. So it's more down to the surveyor and their experience and making sure that they know what they're doing, got the right training and that sort of thing.
You've got to do your time.
Yeah.
In the trenches, getting those fleas, stepping in that stuff. You've got to do it, and you might only learn one thing a week after a few months, but it definitely helps. I'm finding stuff today that 2 or 3 years ago I wasn't looking for.
Oh, amazing.
So yeah, you're always learning, absolutely, which is just purely down to getting some surveys under your belts, quantity, and obviously a variation of sites is huge as well, and even in different areas, which is why we jump back into London asbestos services, and London's got quite a bit of asbestos in it, so it's a fun little playground for us to go in and find some interesting stuff down there. And if you stick to your valley, you might know what certain streets have got in it, but you're only really going to build on your knowledge of the products and where you can find these products just by going to different areas as well.
Yeah, interesting. They say you're supposed to, if you spend 10,000 hours on a subject, you become an expert, right? So just doing the time, getting bit by those fleas, I suppose, and
yeah, it's got to be done. It's got to happen. I don't know if that's a good sell for surveying, to be honest with you. It has good, obviously, advantages as well. But yeah, you've almost got to do it. You can tell if someone hasn't done the rounds, if that makes any sense. Whether maybe they've worked for a smaller company and they haven't had to sit and, whether it's for UCAS audits, which are terrifying, whether it's for, internal audits, whether it's someone sort of going behind you, making, you sure you finished in that room? And you're like, oh, are they being serious, or did I miss anything in there? Those types of things you've got to go through. Simple as that, and it does turn you into a good sort of gold standard surveyor.
Of course.
We talked a lot about surveying today, haven't we? I guess that's the whole point of this, isn't it?
It's funny when my brother was showing me the very first template for flow for asbestos surveying. One of the drop downs is for recommendations for no access areas, like why you couldn't access a room. And one of the options he put in was infestation. And I sort of raised an eyebrow and said, is this right, David? And he's like, oh yeah, that's genuinely a thing that people encounter, as rats or whatever. And I'm not trying to put people off asbestos surveying, of course, but just seem to have locked onto it in my mind a little bit.
It's a nice caveat, to be honest. Yeah, no access due to, just insert animal here, whether it's bees, bats, cats, rats, people. I mean, sleeping tenants is usually one as well. You don't want to bother them, but yeah, you do get the odd caveat like that, which makes things. It's a good story to tell, though, right? It's a good experience to have to run away from bees when you're in an attic space that the hatch is probably 50 meters that way. So yeah, that's fun.
Well, sleeping tenants, that's where your chameleon skills come in, right?
Absolutely, yeah. You got to learn to wake them up safely. They're thinking, who are you? And you got your mask on and everything as well. Got to be safe, right?
Terrifying, yeah. So in terms of client experience, Gareth, I'd love to know how you give clients the best possible experience in Helix and I suppose in previous work as well.
Okay. I think it's being transparent. I think it's, again, I mentioned being charismatic, but you're there for a reason at the end of the day. It's to solve a problem they've got. They don't know anything about it. You're going there as the expert. So by explaining why you're there, giving them a breakdown of the process, initial site visits, the sampling surveys, and how we're going to do that, and where we need to maybe restrict access and what's going to happen. It's a hand-holding sort of experience for them, right? And they're paying for a service of something they know nothing about. So it's providing a good experience. It's a bit cliche again, isn't it? But you're providing an experience for them to a certain extent where you're going step by step to the point where they know they're being legally compliant at the end of it. All that scary carcinogenic stuff's gone, or it's been made safe, or it's been identified. Or they're leaving knowing that their sort of staff have been trained to a level where they know where they sit, they know where they stand in the company as far as asbestos is concerned, and it's bespoke to them as well. So that's why I make sure on all my training courses, whoever got sat in front of me, every course is different. That's why I like training. If I read the same slides every day over and over again, it wouldn't be a fun life. Whereas every single training course that I do, I've got someone different sat in, unless it's a refresher, and I've obviously seen them before. But then it's nice then, right? You've seen them again. So it's making sure that you bespoke the training to the client, because they don't want to know sort of the old man Wizard of Oz stories. They want to know, how does this apply to me and my company?
Yeah.
How do I keep my staff safe? And then want to try and obviously fluff it up with some interesting stuff on the way through, whether it's samples I find on the way through. I've got a lovely sort of collection. I'm not into asbestos that much, I have to say it, but it's a really good prop. I'm like a magician, basically. You just pull this out of hand, go have a look at this. And then it keeps things interesting. It's better than a picture of something, right? Is that they can see it, they can manipulate it. And I've got little sort of perspex containers where they've been made safe. They're obviously REACH compliant, and they can see what raw chrysidolite looks like. They can see what a gas mask cut in half looks like, and they can see what this spool of asbestos string looks like in their hands. Obviously made safe. But it's a better bespoke sort of environment and it's interesting. You can hear them go, wow. Maybe the second or third time they do training, it's not as fun, but it's something they can leave there going, right, well, I know what I need to do. I know what my company needs to do. It was way better than I thought it would be, because they always go in there kind of going, right, let's get through this. And then they leave happy. And I think that's probably a good representation of a good training course.
How could you not be happy when you see that trainer pull the asbestos rabbit out of the asbestos hat?
Exactly, asbestos. I might use that. I might try and get that like a handkerchief and like just chuck on some fire, and it's like a fireproof handkerchief. Got health and safety nightmare, but I need some cool tricks to implement now, I think, as well. We'll have a chat.
Yeah, it's all about the reveal, isn't it? You sound like very charismatic during your training. You might as well go the extra mile.
To distract people from this terrible substance, we need to add flashing lights and jokes, really, don't we?
I'll have to come to one of your training sessions one day, Gareth.
Yeah, definitely. Well, you can be my lovely assistant if you want, Liz.
Brilliant. Well, I would like to ask you some questions about flow, of course. Being here and having had you as one of our clients for a couple of years now, what was life like before you started using flow in terms of your reporting or time spent on reports?
So I've worked for a couple of different companies, and I've used a couple of different types of inputting software. So when I was thinking about going self-employed and starting for myself, I knew what ones I didn't want to use, and I'd obviously heard about flow through a person who I worked with previously. And I remember the conversation we were on the phone. I was sat outside of school, just about to go in to do a refurbishment survey, and you talked me through the process on how flow works, and sent demos through, and sent a lot of sort of useful information on how it would be applicable to what I was looking to do. Because I had a few sort of small clients where they weren't massive school surveys to start with, but they were just small bespoke sort of refurbishment surveys or domestic surveys and sampling surveys and things like that. And you really sold it to me to a certain extent, in that it was a really good fit for what I was looking to do. It saved me a lot of time in that I could build a business and obviously do a lot more surveys in the time that I had as well. So it was really handy for that.
And obviously we were quite a new company back then. Did you have any reservations about moving over to us? I know we're the new kids on the block, haven't been around as long as some of our entrenched competitors. Do you have reservations about sort of switching over to us?
None. I think because I was starting off, I wanted to work with companies who were doing that as well. You had the same mindset. You wanted to sort of see what you could do. You're ambitious, and obviously you wanted to sell your company in the best possible way, and it worked perfectly like that, because I was just starting off, and obviously we had a chat on the phone and things like that. I wanted to work with people who were in the same boat, who think the same mindset. That you talked about your roadmap for improving flow over the years, and obviously you've done that really well. So I wanted to work with companies who are willing to sort of grow and go on their own journey with us, with Helix.
Awesome.
So obviously over time, as your software gets better, it makes my surveys better as well. So it's win-win really.
So nice to hear. Yeah, brilliant. And how has Flow impacted on your business and your life?
It's made things a lot easier. It's the first bit of inputting software that I use on my phone, and I don't have two work phones because I don't want to have to look after two phones, and I don't really want to use a work tablet on site and things like that. So I've got one device I use where all my surveys go straight to there. It's a good quality sort of image. Obviously using a phone, like, whatever phone it is, they've got good cameras nowadays. So it means that the quality of the photos, rather than it be a 12-year-old tablet that's been stuck in a drawer for ages and it takes terrible photos. And if you were to take a photo in like a loft space, you can just see black, you can't see anything. Whereas now with the quality of the photos we've got, it makes the survey look really good. It makes the front photo look really good. So it makes the quality of the survey look a lot better. And I know you shouldn't really fluff it up with that sort of stuff, but it definitely helps, doesn't it? And so that's been really, really handy, and just the ease of creating surveys on the dashboard side of things, really easy as well. So it takes 2 minutes to basically send a survey to my phone, and I can do that in the car before I go in. If I've got like a random call that someone wants a survey done and I'm just down the road, I can just whip my laptop out, quickly set the survey up, it's on my phone, and then off I go. Nice and easy.
Amazing. Yeah. And last shameless plug, I promise. Would you recommend us to other people in the industry?
Yeah, I have.
Oh,
yeah,
awesome.
So
yes, I knew that.
Am I getting commission for that? Or?
If you want.
So any sort of people who are looking to start off, and since I've started Helix, there's been about 2 or 3 different people who've sort of made the same sort of leap as well, and I believe they're using Flow now as well.
Cool.
So I know there are other sort of inputting softwares that they could use, but I think they're using sort of what I've done as a blueprint, in that, well, if he's done it and it hasn't fallen apart, might as well sort of use the same sort of stuff. And yeah, so they've jumped, hopefully they've jumped over to Flow as well.
Brilliant. Thanks so much for the referrals. Appreciate that.
Yeah. I'm, like I said, willing to help anyone who's in a similar boat, and obviously your company's grown nicely. And you're looking to push into new avenues and new offerings and expand and improve the quality of what you've already got. And I want to work with companies like that.
Yeah, brilliant. I'm sure we'll have a long-term partnership.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I just want to finish this interview just by saying what's on the horizon for Helix Environmental, and how do people work with you?
Yeah, definitely. So it's a matter of, I guess, expanding our offering. I'm at a point now where I'm starting to get off-site a little bit more, which is nice. I'm working on the company rather than for the company. With that, we can go for tenders now. We can go for larger contracts, which are multi-property. We can go for, I guess, more reinstatement work now, because we've got good quality sort of partners that we work with. We can expand our radius now, in that, rather than just deal with little old South Wales. We're I guess, a nationwide company to a certain extent. We're in London now, and we might come up here for a little bit so we can see you guys as well, and just set up a little office up here. So we're expanding our offering now, which is really nice. So happy to work with other sort of people who are looking to sort of jump out and start something for themselves, whether it's in asbestos removal, which is one of our offerings at Helix, or whether it's in the surveying side of things as well. So yeah, it's expansion now. Organic expansion. Obviously, cash flows everything, and we want to make sure we do things in a way that it's gradual, it's organic, and we give people a good quality of life at Helix. I want to treat people like humans and not fearing numbers. So, I want to be able to sort of set up Helix events now. We do things with charities. We've got a few events this year that we're going to be doing. So whether it's like marathons or and things like that, we've got a few of those on the horizon, which will be on our social media. We've got we want to set up some events. With COVID, obviously, it's sort of made everyone a bit more walled up now. Everyone's in their own little bubble, so it'd be quite nice to pull sort of people in the local community out a little bit more as well, and get the old barbecue out or something.
Sounds great.
Yeah. I have to maybe bring it up. I'll just have to wrap it in tinfoil for you or something. But so it's a matter of just, I guess, pushing the brand now. Yeah. Not rebranding in any way, but just I guess pushing our name out there in a nice way. We know we provide good service, so it'd be nice for everyone to know about it. But hopefully this helps.
Yeah. I'm sure more and more people hearing about you all the time. And it's certainly been great watching you grow over the last couple of years.
Appreciate it.
Thanks so much for your time during this interview. Really appreciate it, Gareth.
Lovely.
All the best.
Thank you very much. Cheers.